This is Mind Out Loud, where oversharing isn't a crime. It's the whole point. Ready to get uncomfortable? So over the years, people have said to me, you should go to therapy. And I don't know if how I should take that. I guess they're probably right. And over the years, I've come to realize that, yeah, I probably do need to talk to somebody. And that's kind of our topic today. My name is Nick Calderon. This is the Balanced Mind podcast. This is my friend and co-host, Laurie Raymond, who's a licensed psychotherapist. And that got us thinking about this conversation, this topic of, okay, so great. You've taken the step to realize, yeah, maybe I do need to talk through some of my issues. But where do you begin? And Laurie, I feel like in the past several years, it's been made a little bit easier. I've noticed a lot of companies and healthcare providers, sending links and phone numbers. And then there's, the BetterHelp phone number all over the place. It seems easier to find somebody. But honestly, where do you start and how do you know who you need to talk to? We'll get into some of those topics.
Yes. Okay. So there are more options. You're absolutely right, but it's still not easy because there's just so many avenues that you can take and it's hard to know which one is right. So there are many different things we can discuss here, but I'll try to narrow it down. So I often tell my clients, when they ask me, how do I broach the topic of therapy with my friends? So, and how do they start? Often it's about what will your insurance cover? Because here's why: we don't want anyone to align with a therapist over a free 15-minute consultation, only to find out that they're simply cash pay. So many therapists are only cash pay and do not work with insurance companies because it's very difficult. There's a lot of red tape. It's hard to make the math work. I work for an agency and, God bless them. They did all that work for us. And so we have 2 different insurance companies and we're trying to get more that we contract with. So what does a person do? The first thing to do is not what you would think. It's to call your insurance company and ask them if they cover outpatient mental health or outpatient behavioral health. So that's what you do first, and then they'll send you a list. Then okay, I'm not going to get blindsided by a massive bill or feel this drop in my hope because I finally found someone and now I can't afford it. Yeah. No one needs that.
I think that's one of the issues here too, because, I've always said, well, from the beginning of this podcast, I said I'd be genuine and open, and I hate to admit it, but right now I don't have health insurance. And I know I'm not the only one out there listening to this who may be in the same position, who'd say, look, of course, I know I need help. I would love to talk to somebody, but I don't have health insurance and it's expensive. But since we started talking about the insurance issue, let's continue down that path. So, okay. I'm lucky enough to have health insurance. So now, where do I go? You suggest calling the insurance company directly to find out what they offer, and maybe they'll give you a phone number or something like that. So help me understand that.
Yes. Okay. So they'll send you a link of covered therapists. So in network. So if they're out of network, it won't be covered. If it's in network, it will. Then you start your interviewing process. And people say, what are you talking about? Interviewing your therapist? Yes, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Because if you do not feel as though you are a good fit, the therapeutic relationship is not going to go anywhere. So I don't want people to give up too much of their power initially in thinking that, that person's the expert and knows everything. If you don't feel safe or feel a vibe going on in there, then it's too difficult to talk about these hard things. So you would start calling and asking for to set up free consultations for the therapist. You need to look at their bios, obviously, to see if their bios cover what you're struggling with at the moment, and then schedule a consultation and interview them. See what kind of feel you get.
Okay. So now that's interesting too. You're telling me I need to interview and go through the bios of these potential in-network therapists.
Mhm.
But I kind of need to know a little bit about what's going on with me. So help me understand that. Help me identify what process. Is there a couple of steps I could take to understand the challenges that I'm dealing with as a person that's searching out therapeutic help? And
Hmm.
how do I match that up? Help me out.
So are you willing then to be the guinea pig?
Yeah, yeah. I'll be the guinea pig. Sure,
Okay, let's do it. So, what are your presenting issues, is what we call them? What are you struggling with right now? Now, I know, but we want our viewers and listeners.
sure. I'm I'm smiling. I'm laughing because I'm like, where do we begin? What?
Everyone says that. How much time you got?
Yeah, where's my issues?
Yeah.
Well, okay. As we discussed in our previous episode, I have something that I call the dark cloud, where out of nowhere, I will just feel like I can't control anything, or I can't control my mood. I get into this dark, deep, dark mood where I feel like a complete worthless piece of shit, excuse me, where nothing I do, no matter how good life may be that day, I am sacked with just a depression, with just a deep loathing for myself, and I can't seem to dig myself out of it. It'll usually last anywhere from one to usually about a 3 day period. And that's my dark cloud. I struggle with feelings of diminished self worth, and I I left a great job. An awesome job that I had is gone. So now I'm feeling without purpose. Those are some of my basics, I would
Right.
say.
And so any clinician worth his or her salt will know immediately that this is deeply internalized feelings of not good enough. And they'll know where to begin. So we're going, it's self-esteem that's not connected to, this is real easy to say, hard to do, not connected to productivity always. So because that's a moving target. So connected to productivity, connected to status, connected to how much money I make, connected to how big is my house, connected to comparing and contrasting. So deeply internalized, I'm not good enough, deeply internalized self-loathing. And
Okay.
so you would speak to your therapist just exactly like you just did right now on the interview.
On the interview. Okay. So that's good to know. As I'm going down my list, I'm really going through the basics of how I'm feeling in this interview with a,
Yes.
a number of different people. And I'm looking for, what am I looking for? Am I looking for a friendly feeling? Am I looking for a simple chemistry, or am I looking for answers?
You want to see, so if friendly matters to you, like some people want the real, I mean, I'm not talking about rude, but they want a real direct, hard hitting, abrupt type of therapist, or they want the truth, but they want it to be done in a more supportive way because some of the things that they need to talk about are pretty shame inducing. So know what makes you feel safer, a little more comfortable to be able to even envision going forward with this person. So that's different for everybody. But you're always looking for knowledge. Do they have what they're explaining to me, something that they're trained in, something that feels like it hits the nail on the head with me?
Okay. So you really do need to do this interview process. This isn't something that is just a throwaway part of this idea of seeking a therapist. You have to do your homework up front. You have to have an open mind, be willing and ready to accept help. That's
Yes.
not always easy.
No, it's not. You know what is the most common number of times a person will see a therapist?
3 once. Okay.
Once. And often it's because they don't do the prep work. And then they'll just say, I tried it. Therapy's not for me. You have to do the prep work. So the interview thing, the consultation, that's not required. If you want to have a greater success of finding someone who fits your needs, both in education and personality, delivery, and modalities, then you talk to them first.
Okay. Maybe we got ahead of ourselves a little bit here. I kind of want to turn back because there is that issue of accepting the idea that you might need to seek help, right? You might want to talk to somebody. And maybe we have to just briefly talk about coming to that realization. And if there's people out there listening who might think they want some help or have somebody to talk to, overcoming that first step of acknowledging that, yes, I would like someone to talk to. I'm still very reluctant because I don't like the idea that something might be wrong in my head. We still haven't gone down that path. I don't like the idea of admitting to myself that I should talk to a therapist. And that is just me. It is just my own insecurities of coming to the realization that I might benefit by talking to somebody. So I guess there's that step first. How can you help somebody out there listening to come to the idea that it's time to talk to somebody?
Mm-hmm. That's that resistance piece that we're talking about, right? And this is why so many people come once and don't come back, because they don't want to accept the fact that whatever automatic negative messages they've attached to needing a therapist, they don't want to accept that. And so then there's an ignoring of the problem until it gets so bad that they're in crisis mode, and boom, I'm going to go in and see someone. And then they'll do it once,
I did that.
typically twice. Right, right. I've done it before. I've only been doing this for 15 years, and I had a career before this with doing news here in the Valley on TV. So I did the same thing. And I thought, I don't like, this is a waste of my time. And this person, I don't know. It's just, I get it. I get it. You do need to have your own buy-in. And that means that you have to examine, what is this resistance, and ask if those beliefs are working for you or not. So I'm glad that the stigma is changing in the world, but we still have a long way to go. Everybody has an external physical state of being, a physical state of health, and we also have an internal one. It's okay to take care of your body, but so many people say, are you nuts? Why do you need a shrink?
Yeah. Well,
Not okay to
it,
do that? Okay. Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you brought that up again, because that was an issue that you brought up, or a point that you brought up last episode. And if you haven't listened to the very first episode of Balanced Mind, go ahead. It'll give you a better understanding of who I am, who Laurie is. But briefly, we both worked in the news business. That's how we know each other. Laurie went on and got her degree in the science of therapy. And so that's how we came together, because I was looking for a friend to talk to about some of my issues. And that's where we are. So we decided to come up with this podcast. But you mentioned this last time, and you mentioned it again now, is accepting the idea of needing help, and what you've been doing to this point. Has it worked for you?
Right.
And
how's that working out for you?
the answer is no. So maybe it is time to seek help. Okay, so we've kind of gone over this idea of accepting the idea that talking to somebody would be a good idea. And we've gone down the road of how to find that person. Starting with insurance is a good way to start. Um, let's say you don't have insurance, Laurie. Where do you go from there? Are there resources that, if you have found yourself in a crisis mode and you don't have insurance and you don't have that kind of financial support, what do you do? How do you find
Right.
help?
So I'm not going to deny that there is a void there. There certainly is. Yes. That's why I have these, because I made some notes for this part right here. So what do you do? Well, there are some places where you can go. I know that our agency, Family Strategies, started what's called the Hope Foundation. It has grown so big that it's no longer run by us. It's run by volunteers, but they do scholarships for people who get accepted who need and deserve, because they'll look at your income also. And if you get accepted into it, then you will receive X amount of therapy sessions for nothing. So that's one. There are places out there that give scholarships or funding for people to see a therapist. Another thing to do is, now this is going to be difficult for people who are already resistant to the idea of seeing a therapist, because they will really, I think, benefit from seeing someone who's experienced. However, it depends on how bad you're suffering, right? Almost every university, the master's degree counseling program, when they are completely done, they have to do what's called practicum. I had to do it too. And you're seeing clients, you're seeing it for them for free. Everything's monitored. You have to be okay that an instructor who's been a therapist for many years is going to review the videotape and improve that therapist, but that's free. So I think all the colleges do that in their practicum. I know University of Phoenix did. That's another thing. You can also, when you do your interview, try and find that golden nugget therapist who will listen to you about how, okay, I'm limited funds, I really need some help. Is there some way we can make this work? So depending on the therapist's temperament, availability, and caseload, they may do what some therapists do. And I do this to the degree that I can. So I'll have a client come in and she'll do cash pay. He or she will do cash pay for, let's say, once every 2 months. And I will do as much as I can in that session to give as many tools as possible to be able to send with that client. He or she will have to do a lot of the work on their own, but it will give them a place to go and videos to watch, skills to practice, basically get your own psychoeducation until you can come back and see me again.
Okay. So I, this is great information, and I'm glad that we're putting some of the stuff out there. What I've also come to realize too is you have to put in the work.
There you go. Yes.
And I think that for myself, and I'll speak for myself, but sometimes I just don't want to.
Right.
I
Tell me
it's
about it.
hard to admit that you've got some issues to work through, and to look at the amount of work that it takes to fix your head, for lack of a better term, is can be a little bit daunting. Any advice aside from what you've been doing isn't working? Any advice to help people get over that hump, to help me get over that hump of accepting the help and working towards the help?
It sounds like you're getting into what I would consider cognitive behavioral therapy. So what that means is reframing your thoughts. You could start writing down, Nick, what are all the reasons why I'm resistant to doing this? That would be the number one place. Why won't I do this? I really want to do this, but I don't want to do it. Mm-hmm. So you'd write all that down, and then you would reframe some of those. So many of them have to do with, I need to stop thinking that therapy is for crazy people, or therapy is only for wusses, or, whatever automatic negative messages there might be. Let's see. Other ways that you can push past the resistance is to make yourself a goal, and they have to be goals that you are able to reach. So I will do one thing a week to get myself up the ladder into discovering how I can better myself. But I can't tell every person how to get over their own hump until I really know them, because it
Okay.
really does come down to a decision.
I do like, that's a great tip though.
Hmm.
setting a goal, setting one thing that you can do to better yourself that week.
Right.
That's awesome. I love that because now it doesn't seem like a mental mountain in front of me that I have to scale. I
Yeah.
like the idea of
Mhm.
just taking things in smaller bites.
Mhm.
So that's helpful. There we go. I love that. I love that. That's a
Can I add
great
to that?
idea.
I'll just share a personal story. So I see my own therapist whenever I need to. And I think it's especially important for therapists to stay on this track. And, you know, anyway, what I was going to say is when I was going through one of my valleys, I know what I need to do. I know that I need to exercise and I know that I need to meditate. But for some reason, it seemed like Mount Everest, like you were talking about. And so my therapist at the time said, we're going to get rid of all of your automatic negative messages that you're attaching to exercise, which were, come to find out, I need to be working out at least 45 minutes every single day. I need to burn at least X amount of calorie. All of these unrealistic, just stupid. Perfectionism keeps you stuck. It really does. So we examined all those. We just set those aside, and then you know what my homework was? To work out and meditate 5 days a week for 2 minutes.
Okay.
2 minutes, because nobody can say I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
Because what was I working through? A mental block, nothing else, nothing more. A mental block. And once you start doing something different, then the week after that, you're finding out, well, I can do 5 minutes. This is nothing. And then you're like, oh, I just found a 5 minute arm workout. That was not only was that easy, that felt good. I wonder
The
if
reality is
abs,
doing
that,
something is better
that,
than nothing, right?
yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay. Now let's assume we've overcome this blockade, the mental block of not accepting therapy for whatever reason that may be, and now we've gone through some of the interview process of looking for a therapist. Here's another question I've always had too about finding a therapist. How do I know who I'm looking for? Am I looking for a psychiatrist? Am I
Yeah.
looking for a psychologist? Am I looking for a family therapist? I don't really know the definitions. I don't know the difference of what they do. Do I look for a licensed person? How many letters after their name are they supposed to have? Like, how do I find the
It is
person that's
really
right for me?
It is really confusing. So, okay, we'll start with me. So I'm a psychotherapist. So I had a different career before this and then got a master's degree in the science of counseling. That makes you a therapist, a counselor, a psychotherapist. So that's you started as a licensed associate counselor. And then you have to have, it's something like, I don't quote me on this, anyone in the business, but it's something like 3,000 hours of work and supervision and direct our clients. And then you become an LPC, which is what I am and have been for a while, a licensed professional counselor. And you don't require supervision depending on who you work for. In an agency, you do still once a month get supervision. So that's a psychotherapist with a master's degree. Most counselors will have that. So it'll say LPC, that means master's. So did I answer that question?
I think so. Yeah. I yes, but
Okay.
I'm still not sure of when I'm in my processes of trying to find somebody. Who am I looking for?
Yeah. Okay. So let me keep going and maybe it'll answer it.
Okay.
Then when you get into a psychologist, that's someone who's done their undergrad in college, they've done a master's degree in college, and they also have a PhD. So that's a PsyD or a doctorate in psychology. So they are more highly trained, and it depends on their area of specialty. Some are trained in psychological evaluations, giving testing. So these are like 800 questionnaires on does someone have autism or does someone have, they also do regular therapy as well. And I would consider yours, regular is not a good word, typical therapy. typical therapy. A psychiatrist is a medical doctor of the mind, a medical doctor who can prescribe and dispense psychiatric medication. They are not there to counsel you. I have had so many clients say, I went to a psychiatrist and I was talking to him or her about my issues, and they were so cold. And I get that. I don't like that either, because I don't think they need to be. But there are many who are also warm, but their job is not to counsel you. It's to ask what your struggles are, and then to offer you, to suggest what medications might work.
Okay. That's helpful. Okay. So now let's go back to I'm doing my interviews. I've gotten the phone numbers and I'm talking to different people. Um, am I necessarily at that point at the beginning of finding somebody to talk to? Am I looking for those different types of people, or am I just getting started and getting to talk to somebody? And can I trust that that person will maybe direct me to the person that I really need to talk to?
Yeah, so I would recommend that everyone, when they do their consultations, if what you're looking for is medication, you need a psychiatrist. So there are, in some rare cases or instances, where there's a psychiatric nurse practitioner who might be on site who can prescribe and dispense medication, but it's not your master's degree in counseling, and you can't we can't dispense medication. So if that's something that you need, then you ask for it. So
Okay.
if you're calling me, or you're calling what we'll call a typical psychotherapist or a PhD, typical, that means you're looking for continued care until you can get yourself out of whatever valley it is that you're struggling with.
Okay. So you might be on a journey here, depending on your level of need and how the person that you're talking to identifies your need. Um, and I'm sorry if I'm asking the same question, but I feel like I feel like it's what I need to do.
Just do it, because if you have that question, many, many, many more people will too. So go.
Okay. So I did talk to somebody probably a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. And I did what you suggested. I saw a number on my insurance forms and called that number, and somebody answered that arranged me with a person to talk to. And in the end, I talked to that person maybe 8 different times, and it wasn't great. I didn't go through an interview process like you suggested. But I wondered, is this person really listening to me? And are they hearing my issues? And are they listening for things that maybe I need more help? Can I trust in that first step of therapy? Can I trust that the person that I'm talking to is going to elevate my case if they hear things that I'm saying that maybe they aren't equipped to handle? Is that person going to be trustworthy enough? Are they going to do the thing that I need them to do and guide me to a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist and kind of take me up the ladder?
Yes. So are you going to find people who abuse the system? Sure. But we are regulated pretty closely by the Arizona Board of Behavioral Health Examiners. CIDEs have a different board, but that's what ours is. And we are beholden to a much higher standard than even the state laws. So it's a code of ethics by which we are sworn to follow. And that means when people call us and we are not able to help them, we're required to tell them that. Are there some bad eggs out there who are going to lie to you and try to pretend that they can be all things to all people? Of course. But for the majority, counselors are people who want to help. And typically speaking, counselors are rule followers, and they simply want to, like you said, elevate people and get them to the right help. We can be reported to the board and lose our license if we practice outside our scope of expertise. In fact, in my evaluation this morning, that was one of the questions. What grade would you give yourself on staying in your lane, so to speak.
Okay.
And I have an A, by the way.
So I imagine that when you call these insurance companies, it's kind of like round one. You're being introduced to somebody that can maybe hear you out and start to identify your issue. Let's imagine that I'm there. Let's imagine that I've done my interview and I've gone through. And thank you for giving us some of those tips about how to find the right person. So now I've gotten to my person. I'm still a little scared.
Yeah.
What advice would you give and help me understand how this goes? Am
Mhm.
I expected to just lay bare what my issues are? Am I relying on the person on the other line or on the other end to draw things out of me? Where does it, for somebody who's never done therapy before and thinks they might, help us overcome the fear of what we're getting into
Okay.
and what we should expect?
Once again, it's going to differ from person to person based on their personality. It traumatizes a lot of people when a therapist is like a machine gun asking all of these intense questions. It's too much too soon. No, the number one goal of the first meeting, the intake session, yes, we have to do the paperwork that's required by law. Yes, yes, yes. That person needs to feel that they're safe with you. They have to feel as though she or he, they really care about me. I really get that sense. And if you don't feel that, if you have the ability to, a lot of people don't, they just leave. If you have the ability to express it. Now, that's not easy for a lot of people. They're just gone, right? Uh, a therapist who's done his or her work, I'm not going to say that wouldn't jar them a little bit, but they'll say, "Thank you for being honest. Let's explore that. Where does that come from?" That's where you make the progress, right? Stuff like that, but not typically in an intake. It's just about getting a sense of how you feel in the presence of this person.
Okay. So uh, feeling good in the presence of somebody and finding, I don't want to call it a friend, but finding somebody that you, a confidant, somebody you're comfortable with.
You know?
Is
Yeah.
there any value in finding somebody in your interview process? I'm sort of backstepping a little bit. Um, that is like you. I kind of felt like I needed somebody who is a contemporary. I kind of felt like I needed a guy in his 40s to 50s that would know what I'm talking about. Does gender matter? Does age matter of the therapist that you're looking for? Or are we really just looking for a gut feeling that feels right?
They both matter. They both matter. Yeah.
Okay.
And one is not more important than the other. Mm-mm. You need to feel as though you can, that you're comfortable enough to get uncomfortable with this person because you're going to be uncomfortable at some point when you're discussing certain things. And you want to know, is this a safe person? Do I feel as though this is a safe enough person to bear it all where I really don't want to talk about any of this? Then the other issue is, do they know what they're talking about? Is it a good fit for me? Do I want a man? Do I want a woman? That's personal preference.
Okay. And so there's no real rule to this. It's
No.
a little bit of trial and error
Yeah,
and
unfortunately, yeah.
doing your work and looking for something that fits.
Yes.
Um, I think maybe we've been done a disservice by TV and movies and things like that, where you're going to get bombarded by questions and you're going to
Yes.
dig deep
Mhm.
into your childhood and your past. And I'm going to have to remember things that happened when I was 7 years old. And how does that matter in my life today? Am I being silly here? Does some of that stuff happen? Should I go into a therapy session with preconceived ideas? Again, I guess I'm looking to you to help me feel comfortable. And
It's hard not to, Nick, though.
yeah,
It's hard not to walk in without preconceived ideas. So if you're able to talk to him or her about it. Here's what I'm afraid of. Here's what I'm worried about. Here's why I'm nervous. If you're not able to do that, that's okay as well in the first session. Uh, Another tool is to write down what you want to say. I mean, you have the gift of gab, so you wouldn't need to do this, but some people freeze up in their intake, and it's very difficult for them to discuss some pretty painful things, pretty traumatic things. So they'll simply write them down, and a good therapist will be able to tell how much they're struggling. You don't want them to go too far outside of what we call a window of tolerance. We need to be within this window of tolerance. If the client is getting too escalated with either rage or anxiety, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's tears. Of course, I consider that a good sign because it's moving through trapped traumatic energy, but I won't push a client through it. I'll check in and say, how are you doing? Typically, this doesn't happen a whole lot during the intake, but it might. And so we make sure that we're not pushing too far, but that we're trying to get enough information to be able to help them get their answers. Did I answer that question? I'm not sure if I answered
You
completely.
did. You did. Yeah. And I guess I'm looking for those little tidbits, those little tips that um, would help me get through some of this stuff to start that fear of accepting that, yes, I need help. What I've been doing hasn't been working. So let's try some therapy. Let's call the insurance company. Let's find that person. Let's do the work to find the interview. And I'm sorry, my headphones are really bothering me. Let's do the work to find the right person. And all of that is just great information. Now, um, finding the comfort, that's just a matter of maybe more than one session. So if I'm unsure in
Mhm.
this first session, do I continue? Do I go? How many sessions should I go through with this person to try and develop a rapport? I know everybody's different, and I'm asking you for for hard evidence here, for for
Right.
numbers. I'm a guess a logical male mind, but
Yeah. Hmm.
am I going to give it one try, three tries to
Right.
to feel right?
Because we can't really answer away all of the unknowns. I wish that I could answer away all of the unknowns, but there's always another one. I typically tell people, take stock of how you feel after you leave. That means I'm talking about how you feel being in the presence of that person. Of course, we're going to feel anxiety. Of course, we're going to feel reticence over what we are going to discuss, or that's not uncommon. But as a human being, how did I feel treated? How was I treated? How do I feel? Was I respected? Was I heard? Did I have a chance to really talk? Did they seem truly present and tracking me and concerned? Ask good follow-up questions. It's an overall sense of how did that feel for me in terms of can I work with this person going forward?
Okay, that's good advice. I don't know why. I'll bear a little bit here. I don't know why, but for some reason, while you were talking through this, I remembered a moment when I was growing up. I couldn't have been more than 6 years old. And Roman Catholic, I was born, and my family didn't really practice much, but I do remember going to confession. And I guess that maybe was the first experience I had with telling somebody my problems. And if you've never been into a Catholic confession, it's a weird thing. You're walking into what is honestly a closet, and you're
Mhm.
sitting on a hardwood bench, at least in my experience, and there's a screen and there's somebody on the other side. You probably know the priest on the other side, but you're not looking into each other's eyes. There's no real personal connection, and you're expected to dump your problems or confess your sins. And that's supposed to somehow make you feel good. But here's what happened.
Yeah. Oh, I
Here's
know.
what happened in that situation as a young boy in this sort of church that was a little overwhelming. You know, you go in and you, oh, I lied. I said a bad word, whatever I did that day, that week. And then they tell you, you know, here's say 10 Hail Marys and you'll be good. So I thought that I had to do my penance right then and there. So I walk out of this confessional and I walk up to the front of a bustling church that's full, right in the middle of, you know, all of the proceedings. And I kneel down at the front of the church to go through my 10 Hail Marys, my Our Fathers, whatever my penance was. And all the other kids are coming up, they're kneeling down for like 2 seconds and they're going back to their seat. So now here I am thinking that, boy, I must be really bad. God must really be mad at me. I and I'm sitting there and I'm losing track of how many prayers I've said, and now I'm terrified and I feel like shit because I'm kneeling in front of all of these people, which seems like an eternity as all these other kids are coming and going, and in my mind they're good kids. That was my first memory of what I would consider talking to somebody, and it was horrible. It was traumatic.
That's humiliating. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
humiliating.
yeah. And we call that, it's one of the reasons why I work with religious trauma. I know that sounds like it's a dramatic word, but we either say trauma with a capital T or trauma with a lower T, but I would call that a big one. And I know therapists are made fun of for, let's go back to your childhood. This is why we do it. That's why, because we pick up all these automatic negative messages. I'm not saying that you believe that to this day. I know you don't. However, it can grow in ways in which we are unaware, that stays trapped within our brains in the limbic system and affects us in some ways. I'm not telling you that this has or has not, but this is why we explore, because
So
we want. I'm sorry,
that's
go
the
ahead.
kind of thing I might go through.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because that's a shaming moment that was there. There are many layers here. A shaming moment connected to God as you knew him at the time, knew what it meant to you at the time, right?
Yeah.
So we have those two layers. It was during a session that was going on, and that internalized so much something's wrong with me already. And
Yeah.
you were
No,
how old? 6?
there's no doubt that was a milepost moment. No
Yes.
doubt.
Yes. So see, this internalized, these deeply internalized feelings of not good enough start young. And we don't even, we think, okay, I remember that moment as humiliating, but we don't realize that it takes up a little part of space in our brain unless it's dealt with, which the world tells you, oh, come on, kiddo, suck it up. You're not, it's not like you're on the front lines here. All right, great. But that doesn't help us push it through, push it out, push it through and push it out with the right therapist, because that's internalized shame. That can be internalized shame.
Okay. We starting to get off topic just a
Oh,
little
I know.
bit, but
I can do that.
it
You got to reel me in.
no, that's no, I went that way and that's fine. And this is, we're going to go all over the place in this podcast. We're going to cover a lot of different things, but it does bring me back a little bit to now identifying things. And that kind of feels good to identify something like that.
Yeah.
There's, and this, I'm imagining myself sitting in a session with you, and there's a part of me that says, "Okay, I'm glad I shared that moment with you. I'm glad you have identified that as possibly being something that could be affecting me still." But there's also a huge part of me that wants to call bullshit on it. There's a huge part of me that wants to just say, "Look, that's part of growing up, kid. So what? You know, just because you remember that doesn't mean that it's traumatic in any way." So as much as I shared, I also want to pull back and call bullshit on myself, because so what?
Right. Yeah. And once again, I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong, because life has a lot of beautiful moments and a lot of pretty traumatic ones too. Let's just face it. It you don't have to look far, not outside of your own house or within it, to find some real challenges. And we don't have an excuse. We must keep going. So I always try to help my clients reframe that into, why not get as much support if it helps, if it's working, why not get as much additional support as you can to take care of your mental health? So we can use that whole, oh, that's horseshit, I'm going to just suck it up and deal with it, and I'm going to be tough. There are benefits to that. We have to do that at work. We have to do that out in the world. And there are places where we don't have to do that, because
Yeah.
this stuff gets stored up, Nick. It gets stored up in the body, and it has an impact physically and emotionally. Too much. Oh, I see. I could talk forever. Go ahead. Yeah.
No, no, this is why we're here. Don't apologize for that. And I think, it just even talking to you in these sessions is helpful because yeah, I do want to call BS on some of those things, but now I'm starting to understand a little bit more where people say anybody can benefit from therapy. You don't have to be a head case. You don't have to
Thank
be,
you. Yes.
anybody can benefit. Talking, yes, a lot of us had these bullying issues or this or that issue. And yeah, you can suck it up and deal with it, or you can actually just discuss it with somebody and maybe at the end of the day feel better. You don't necessarily have to be, and forgive me if I'm throwing around some flippant terms of being a head case or this or that.
I want to use the vernacular that the world uses. So bring
Yeah,
it. I'm doing it back when I say shrink. And
yeah,
I understand. I
yeah.
understand. Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I get it a little bit more, and maybe some of the folks that might be listening get it a little bit more too. This, we're not. I've joked that I'm broken in many ways, or I feel broken.
Right.
But maybe it's just a simple fact of chatting through daily life with somebody who is trained to chat through daily life.
Yes. And it's far more, if someone only wants talk therapy, then that's available. There are many different forms of therapy, including neuroscience. So we would begin with, how are you talking to yourself? Because if that shaming moment led to another shaming moment and another and another and another, and let's just say the shame part of your mind is overflowing, then when you're having your, yeah, right, exactly, I know. So when you're having your dark moments, the 3 days out, blackout, that's from an overwhelming, it can be, I shouldn't say it is from, it can be from all this overwhelming shame. It needs to be released. So talking is one way, then it's reframing it. And I'll talk you through that later, but it's kind of a long process. There's also neuroscience, accelerated resolution therapy, eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. I'm trained in both of those. That's to get the reactivity out of the body. We don't lose the knowledge, we don't lose the facts. It's not magic. I'm not gonna tell you that I'm gonna levitate in a moment here. It's getting rid of the reactivity of remembering those moments when they come up. Then we don't speak to ourselves, or we do it less often. I'm a piece of crap. It'd be better off, the world would be better off if I wasn't born. It starts to lose its effect on us.
Okay. Well, we covered a lot today, and we could go on, which is great because this podcast has legs because I've got so many questions for you and so many things that I would like to continue to share with you and our audience. But I did want to get a little bit more understanding about how this first step, taking the first step of understanding that getting help, talking to somebody is good, and what that process looks like. What can people expect once they make that decision to seek out help? So thank you for kind of shedding some light on that initial process, that step one of overcoming the fear of talking with somebody. I love the idea of those small bites, the bite-sized pieces of tackling this mental mountain. So thank you, Laurie. Is there anything else that maybe you want to leave us with on this topic of step one of therapy?
Just to normalize the fact that anxiety comes with the action. It's normal to be anxious. It's normal to be afraid or to be reticent or to be on guard. That's very normal. please remember, you have the power. You have the right to discern if this person is going to be good for you or not. That's your decision. That's not the therapist's decision.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Laurie. I can't wait to talk to you again and continue our session. But I appreciate your time, and thanks to everybody for listening to Balanced Mind. As always, you know the drill: like, subscribe, thumbs up, ding dong, notifications, whatever you got to do to stay in touch with us and continue this journey with us. We'd love to have you along, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.